Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Real Talks. I'm actually joined by a special guest today. He currently hails from Moore Park, California. He's been a leading film critic who's covered Hollywood for the better part of 15 years, getting his start writing for his alma mater, entitled The Guardian, at Wright State University, where he majored and later earning a degree in film theory and criticism. After graduating, he began his own blog and started to write reviews for that. After many years of hard work, his success paid off, becoming the film critic for the Huffington Post Online. While there, his career flourished again, and eventually taking the next step. And in April of 2013, he joined Forbes, where he is now as a contributing writer, and soon thereafter made the leap to the full-time staff. For nearly the last 10 years, he's been covering not only the films themselves, but delves into the box office each and every week. He and David Chen host a weekly Twitter space where they talk about everything movies. I'm honored to have Mr. Scott Mendelson here on Real Talks. Thank you for being here, Scott. And where can they find you and your work?
Still Forbes.com. Google some variation of Forbes in the ticket booth and Scott Mendelson. And yeah, as far as my quote-unquote path to whatever, I started writing my own blog in 2008 just as something to do after my first kid was born. Obviously, it wasn't a job. Even the HuffPost thing, that was something that came to me probably about 6 months after I started doing my own thing, and just a sort of a syndication type thing. It was never paid. It was something where I'd write for this post and then copy and paste over here, and it just was a slightly bigger outlet, and it got me in the door in terms of making studio contacts and then getting into screenings. Just because the HuffPost name, for better or worse, people know that. I was recruited by Forbes in April 2013, initially as a contributor, and that's basically been my job since April 2013 in one way or another. And yeah, still is.
Nice. So many questions, and we can save those for another time, but I thought what we do today is jump into, do a little wrap-up show of Comic-Con, which was one of the biggest events, and which is one of the biggest events of the year, especially this year, considering this is the first year we've had a full-fledged Comic-Con since the pandemic. Were there anything that you were really before it happened? Was there anything you were really looking forward to or hoping that would happen?
Well, there were rumors that Henry Cavill was going to show up and announce Man of Steel 2. I never thought that was the case. I was kind of hoping he would show up and then announce he's not doing Man of Steel 2, just to troll with all that specific fandom. Or, Toby Emmerich would walk up on stage during the Warner Brothers panels like, Elvis outgrows Lightyear. Bye-bye. And then walk off stage accordingly. Sadly, neither of those things happened. Other than that, I was expecting a little bit more from the Warner Brothers DC panel, but in terms of expectations versus reality, they had all the stars of their next two big movies. They showed new footage. They showed new trailers for both of those films. And they did a normal panel where they interacted with the moderators and the fans. And that's what Comic-Con is supposed to be. The idea that they, whether it wins or loses Comic-Con or whatever, that's neither here nor there. If you want my opinion, I would argue Warner Brothers, they've been burned by long lead advertising before in terms of, playing to the geeks that already converted. Well, I think they finally understand, as does the industry, that most people don't really start paying attention to stuff until about 5 or 6 weeks out from release. So, assuming it's good, and so it is, 4 months is enough time to sell Black Panther and Wakanda Forever. So you didn't need to put out a teaser attached to Shang-Chi and then another teaser attached to Spider-Man and, basically a year-long ad campaign. Now, if Chris Nolan wants to put an announcement teaser for his latest movie and exactly a year out, fun of it, that's fine. But, the Oppenheimer trailer was fine. It was an announcement teaser. It plays better, as one of, 6 trailers before a movie than it does as its own thing dropping online to the thrill of everyone. And that's, that goes into a broader conversation of how we've started to treat trailer, not started, it's been a decade, where we treat trailer drops as news in and of itself. So you have a trailer like, the teaser for The Lion King, teasers for all that were basically bare bones announcers trailers that, you see that stuff in a theater with, in a 10-minute, 20-minute trailer reel, oh, that's neat. It's making a laugh. But if you're somebody that's like breathlessly waiting for it to pop up during the football game and you're refreshing Twitter 10,000 times in an hour, it might be a little bit, what you get might be a little disappointing. But again, I think they're taking all this into consideration. As far as Warner Brothers DC slate, yeah, I'm sure there was some concern about the Ezra Miller situation and, relatively speaking, because I don't want to equate them morally or legally, the Amber Heard situation. And the other thing is, I think even more simpler than that is that, Black Panther or Wakanda Forever opens in November. That's a pretty good place to drop your first Avatar trailer. And then Shazam and Avatar both come out in late December. Those are both good places to drop a Flash trailer. And if you're playing to the actual people that need to go to the theater to buy tickets to make this film financially successful, you don't need Comic-Con. And you haven't. Comic-Con has been almost this is a simplistic concept, but almost a snake eating its tail for the last several years, because at the end of the day, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Lord of the Rings, any of these very geek-centric properties that became huge mainstream blockbuster franchises, they became blockbuster franchises by convincing people didn't know who Thor was, or maybe hadn't read the Lord of the Rings books, or, what have you, to show up. And that audience isn't going to be at Comic-Con. You're preaching the converted. In fact, what I would argue, most of the long lead marketing materials that we've seen over the last decade or so are about preaching the converted. And that's fine if you keep your expectations and or financial obligations in check, but you don't want to blow your wad. If you want an election season, yes, you have to win the primary, but at the end of the day, you want to keep enough money for the general election. That may be a bad analogy, but whatever. So yeah, I think, as to why the Warner Brothers panel was maybe smaller scale, lower profile than some of us thought, there are other outside, extenuating circumstances that felt, but that's a whole different conversation. And the other thing is, I think, looking objectively in terms of pitching to general audiences, you'll use Black Panther Wakanda Forever to launch some of this stuff.
Yeah,
and then
so this Comic-Con
else.
was basically, as what I said to you right up before we began, it was like a Marvel Con. DC did have some stuff there, but when Kevin Feige came up on stage, they had the next 10 years planned, and so, and which we were just talking about, Wakanda Forever, which does drop in November, is going to be the final film of Phase 4.
November 11th.
Yeah. Well, I think he knew.
I like how Feige.
I think he knew.
Just came out and said, "Yeah, Phase 4's over. Yeah, put that behind you." Yeah. Well, again, this is sort of the difference between general audience interest, awareness, opinions versus the perpetually online. And you know this because we all live in a bubble unless we are lucky enough to get out. But the regular, the general moviegoers, they thought Doctor Strange was fun. They thought Spider-Man Far From Home was a lot of fun. That's why they saw it a bunch. They thought Shang-Chi was terrific. They weren't crazy about Black Widow.
Yeah.
They were big on Eternals. They probably could take or leave Thor. They probably didn't watch most of the Disney Plus shows. But it doesn't mean, oh no, Marvel is doomed. What are we going to do? And I think the idea that, oh no, Marvel needs to tell us what their grand plans are right now. Again, I think that's a social media driven problem. Or social media driven narrative. He dropped a whole bunch of stuff because he wanted to. That's how you win Comic-Con with Marvel. And I think to their credit, they generally deliver on what they announce. with a few exceptions here and there. But I mean, not to pick up DC because that's a whole complicated conversation. But we're still waiting for a Green Lantern movie. We're obviously not getting a Cyborg movie. We're obviously not getting a second Justice League movie. Having said that, we weren't supposed to get a Birds of Prey and Joker and Wonder Woman 2. So we've gotten some stuff that wasn't announced. We haven't gotten some stuff that wasn't announced. It probably evens out in the grand scheme of things. But as far as Marvel's thing, I mean, in terms of controlling the narrative, it was in their interest to announce that Phase 4 is over. The stuff that we're making now is going to be released on time. When we say it's going to be released the first time, and again, that's COVID. It's not their fault necessarily. And so I do think there is a certain, okay, this is, we're kind of back on track after a few years of A, COVID-related, changes, and B, just the fact that, if you ever watched a serialized TV show, fantasy or otherwise, the fourth season can be kind of bumpy. Because you've got that perfect 3-season arc that could be a series finale, whatever. And then season 4 is like, okay, what are we doing now? Gilmore Girls, Smallville, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Lost to a certain extent. I imagine nobody's favorite season of Buffy is season 4. And I think, I was saying that 4 years ago, it was gearing up for the end. It's like, season 4, phase 4 of Marvel could be bumpy. And again, I didn't realize it's a global pandemic on the horizon. So it's one of those situations where I was right unintentionally. Or I wrote a piece in 2018. It's like, they should take a year off after Avengers Endgame. And at the time I was just thinking, make it feel more like the finale and give it more impact in that sense. And they had just fired James Gunn, initially. So it's like,
from what I understand, not to cut you off, from what I understand, and I don't know this to be true or false, there was something about Guardians 3, that trailer getting leaked online.
And
did you hear about this? Or was that completely... Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure some footage got leaked online. It always happens. I mean, I've been... my second year of blogging was 2009. Yeah, I was able to see a bootleg of the Fireman 2 teaser a day after it dropped, even though I did not go to Comic-Con. I didn't write about it, but whatever. I mean, there's never been a case of where a trailer drops online early and it does negative, it does genuine harm to the film that's being advertised. Because again, that's not the audience that you need to be a general audience's global hit. You need the people that didn't even know there was for sure that there was an Iron Man 2 coming until they walk into Avatar on opening weekend. And oh shit, it's an Iron Man 2 trailer. Neat. There are people that, this is not perpetually online. They showed up to, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness on opening weekend, and they were surprised by the Avatar trailer. Both that it was attached to that film and that it was done, basically. That it was far enough along to see this thing in 6 months. And they were kind of happy in a way that I wish I envied them to a certain extent. Because obviously we live in a very different world. We live in a world, when you're in the media, when you're covering this stuff, especially for geek-centric pictures, the media / marketing / promotion cycle for these things are so pervasive that the whole part of it where they actually go in front of the cameras...
No. This is why we get your insight and get people like yourself on the show, because you've been in the game for 15, 20 years and you know what you're talking about. Somebody like me who's trying to get in the game, their foot in the door. Nonetheless, though, but they did. So let's get back to Marvel for a minute. They dropped, as you said, a ton of stuff. The Wakanda Forever trailer, and so we have another Captain America on the horizon, Sam Wilson from the Falcon and Winter Soldier. We have 2 more. So we now finally know who the villain is for this phase, and that's the Avengers, the Kang Dynasty. Do you think it's going to be detrimental to them and when I say them, I mean Marvel. Do you think it's going to be detrimental to them to have 2 Avengers movies coming out in 6 months? I mean, because the reason I say this is, if you look at the first one, it was 2012. If you look at Age of Ultron, it was 2014 or 15. You're seeing a movie every couple of years, which makes it okay. And now you're getting 2 in 6 months. Even Endgame and Infinity War, which needed a year, do you think it's going to be compacted too much?
Yes. I agree with you. Maybe. I mean, it didn't work for the Matrix sequels, but it did work for the Twilight Zone. And, by that I mean New Moon opened in November of 2009, made $700 million worldwide, and then the Twilight Saga Eclipse opened in June of 2010, and A became the franchise that only $300 million domestic grosser, and made another about $700 million. So in that case, I mean, it didn't get a bump, but it was in the middle of the series. But obviously, the Matrix, if by some fluke everybody hates Avengers, the Kang Dynasty, that's a problem. But I mean, they just announced that Destin Daniel Cretton is directing it, and that makes perfect sense because Shang-Chi was sort of, in my opinion, the one unmitigated success of the MCU Phase 4. All due respect to Spider-Man, but that's a Spider-Man movie from Sony that was banking on the popularity of Sony's Spider-Man pictures. I'm not saying it's not a thing good, but in terms of Disney's narrative, Disney's strength with Marvel, it only counts so much. In the same way that, yay, Warner Brothers can sell a Batman movie, right? But yeah, so I'm very happy to see that he's directing that, both because I would argue Shang-Chi is one of their better solo pictures, period. Certainly, I'd say offhand, it's my favorite Part 1 solo Marvel movie behind the first Captain America, which I am and remain very fond of. That was the first Marvel movie I loved. It was the first reason, it actually got me excited for the Avengers, almost single-handedly. Because, I'll be honest, I didn't like Iron Man. I didn't like Incredible Hulk anymore than anyone else did. And I wasn't crazy at Iron Man 2.
So, I guess, so
this was
the number of views
and franchise among many.
YouTube has their algorithm and everything else, and I get that.
Stinks that bomb, but whatever.
This one trailer that was dropped last weekend got 172 million views in 24 hours. Yes. And so, in comparison, I mean, I guess my question is this. Black Panther opened to $202 million.
I assume you're talking about
it's only one of 8 movies ever to make that amount.
Yeah.
I mean, Jurassic World, The Force Awakens, I could go on and on and on. The Avengers, The Last Jedi. Okay. So, my question is, do you think this can make more than 202 in its opening weekend?
The Last Jedi, Avengers 1, Avengers 3, Avengers 4. And that might be it offhand. Oh. Now that I've seen the trailer, I'm more optimistic than I was. Not that I'm not but it's as a general rule, when part ones go to infinity and beyond, there's only so much room for the sequel to break out. Yes, it could. It absolutely could. Just because most people that saw Black Panther liked it.
Yeah.
It was leggy as hell, which means you have people that saw it on weekend, saw it on weekend 12, saw it on DVD, saw it on Disney Plus. It was one of, please don't quote me as an authority on this, but I think it was one of the most popular movies on Netflix in 2018. Back when it was on when Netflix had the Disney films. And it's not like its reputation has decreased in the last 4 years. There's been no backlash. Not that there should be, but these things go. And not to be morbid or insensitive, but I do think the Chadwick Boseman factor creates a certain curiosity that otherwise wouldn't exist. Now, for the record, I think it would have been a giant smash hit anyway, just as The Last Jedi would have been a big hit whether Carrie Fisher had survived or not past the age of 60, with due respect. This is not a dark, like Furious 7 situation, where the shocking death of a major cast member takes the film from big deal to global news story. This was always going to be a seismic event regardless. But I do think the morbid or non-morbid
obviously. I
but
mean,
how
I
they're
think...
handle that particular
absolutely.
might spur opening weekend interest beyond, hey, it's another Black Panther movie. And again, that's just, it gives from an A+ opening to an A++.
Well, here's the thing.
I don't want to throw out numbers.
And it's so difficult, too, because,
when you're dealing at this level,
for example, nobody thought Doctor Strange Multiverse Madness was going to make 187.
Arguing that Hollywood
Nobody. And that was an okay movie.
We only thought it might do 175 over the opening weekend instead of 202. It's like, that's not how this works.
But then again, on the flip side, I don't think people really thought Spider-Man No Way Home was going to crack 200. So it's a crapshoot one way or the other. We know it's going to make 100.
I think there were people that
if you ballpark it, it's probably going to make about 150. Yeah.
For me, it always looked like...
It's probably going to make right around 150, 160, 100... I mean, look, Civil Wakanda Forever. I was just curious. I think it's probably going to make right around the average opening, give or take.
It's going to make it.
Okay, give or take the last few years. And I mean, you have Spider-Man on the high end at like 208 or 209.
Wait, what
the
film?
Low end is probably like one.
Wait, we talking?
Okay.
Which movie are we talking?
So the low end is probably like 130. So if you ballpark it right in the middle, I mean, Doctor Strange made 187. Thor made, I want to say, like 140 something. So I mean, you're looking at 144.
260. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
144. But here's the thing, and there are tons and tons of people that couldn't give two hoots about the MCU before 2018 and after 2018 that will be there with bells on for Black Panther Wakanda Forever. That's one reason why it's such an important franchise. Representation notwithstanding and all that, that discourse. It is a franchise that has a fandom outside the MCU.
Yeah.
So maybe bigger than the MCU. I mean, it made more money than any MCU movie other than in North America than the last Avengers. I mean, it made more than Avengers 2, Avengers 3, Captain America 3, you throw everything, everything that all this would be huge because Marvel's so popular. Black Panther plus especially having seen the trailer, it looks very good.
Kevin Feige came out. It
certainly doesn't look like this was a film that they...
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Kevin Feige came out and he ended up calling
I love the last Force Awakens trailer.
The phases, the multiverse phase saga, but basically, so phase 5...
But I think right now the sky's the limit.
Phase 5, I have no desire to see the new Ant-Man movie.
What I think is interesting,
even though that kicks it off.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So they're coming back, and they've got, as I said, Captain America, New World Order. They've got the Thunderbolts, and Fantastic Four is supposed to finally come out in November 2024. Any idea? Or, okay, let me ask you this question. If you could pick one director today to direct Fantastic Four, who is it?
Jennifer U. Nelson, because I wanted to make lots of money and make big movies. I think Kung Fu Panda 2 is one of the best American animated films of the last 20 years. I think it's one of the best Hollywood martial arts movies in the last 20 years. I think it's incredibly underrated. And before Wonder Woman, it was the biggest grossing movie from a solo female director. And frankly, bias against animation, and frankly, bias the fact that she's an Asian woman, is why she did not get the kind of opportunities that would have gone from making a action adventure comedy that made $660 million worldwide on a 160 budget.
Yeah.
Other than that, when people do fan casting for directors, at the end of the day, for me, my thing is, okay, who do I want to see make money? Because even if the movie stinks, it's not like Chloe Zhao is not going to be able to make.
Oh yeah, no,
because we didn't have returns.
You're thinking of the one with Tom Hanks. No, I understand what you.
Good for her.
Yeah, but
Jennifer E. Nelson, Maria Heller, who I think is spectacular. She's done 3 films: Diary of a Teenage Girl, and You Have to Forgive Me, and Another Day, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Wait, which was the name? Which was the documentary? Which was the actual movie?
Yeah.
But yes, which I did. Yeah. And honestly, when people were talking about, is Man of Steel 2 going to happen? It's like, I don't care. But if it does, I think she would be a wonderful person to make a Superman movie. Because I think the Mr. Rogers movie is, at its core, about the fact that being kind is incredibly hard work. And I think that's that to me would be an angle to play with the Superman movie.
Yeah.
But again, in the broad scheme of things, I think Superman is one of those characters like Robin Hood, like King Arthur, like Tarzan, where there are more. Everyone's heard of them. That doesn't mean they actually want a movie about them. We haven't had a hit Superman, an unmitigated successful Superman movie in 40 years. In Superman 2. Which was, to a certain extent, successful because people liked Superman 1. Which was successful to a certain extent because it was the first, basically it was the first of its kind. And it was a very good movie from an unusually talented and accomplished and thoughtful commercial filmmaker, Richard Donner. So, I think to a certain extent, a lot of times what we mistake for, people like this movie, they must want to see a franchise or whatever. No, they just liked the movie because it was good. And maybe they'll see another one because they like this, this specific cinematic incarnation of this franchise, but that doesn't mean they want to see other versions of it again and again and again. One big problem that Hollywood has always had, and certainly more so in the last 10 years or so when, as IP has become more dominant, is like they're mistaking the abstract for the specific. People liked Inception because they liked Inception. The very specific variables that film brought to the table. That doesn't mean they want a remake of Total Recall. Or people love Jordan Peele's Get Out because of the specific elements of that film. It doesn't mean they want a bunch of grim, dark horror movies about slavery. In fact, that's an almost ghoulishly funny misreading of that picture.
Yeah.
A film that, while it earns its R rating, doesn't, pardon me for using cliche, does not wallow in black paint. And that's a big reason why it works as a crowd-pleasing, a horror comedy. But, it's people like Harry Potter, that doesn't mean they want to see The Darkest Rising. They liked Aladdin, that doesn't mean they want to see Dumbo. They like Batman in 1989, that doesn't mean they want to see The Shadow. And that has been, a lifelong lesson in terms of Hollywood continuously learning the wrong thing from a lightning in a bottle hit.
I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. It's been a minute. Probably the Superman movie, which you were just referring to, the Richard Donner one.
I can't even think off the top of my head last.
Everything else in the last 30, 40 years has been. You've had.
I'm sure if you go back, the Chronicle Baby that was made for like $10.
Yeah. And
I can't.
But no, so speaking of
No, I just
animation,
mean superhero in general.
Spider-Man
I just
freshman
mean,
year
like,
was announced
the
that it's
last
going to be
not
released in
Marvel
2024.
not DC adaptation
So this is
was
an animated
a
series that
smash hit
follows
for
Peter
the
Parker's
franchise
journey to
was The
become
Kingsman,
Spider-Man. And of
which
course, they've got
is
Charlie
not a superhero movie
Cox, who's
at all.
coming back to voice Matt
It's
Murdock,
basically one of
Daredevil.
Roger Moore,
And
James
I guess
Bond
he's
films
going to be
were
playing a
really
mentor
part of
to
R-rated
him
films.
of some sort.
And that's a
And you're going to have all these villains in there. And they're
anyway.
so confident about this, Scott, that they've already ordered the sophomore year, and it's already in development. Do you think people are starting to get... Yeah.
We'll play Matt Murdock for food. Well, it's a Spider-Man cartoon. Kids will watch it. I just think it's funny that you have people online that are like pretending to be confused about the continuity. It's like, it's a kids' cartoon. Don't stop it. Stop. And that's one of the issues with discourse and whatever is that you have all these adults that are into these properties that are technically for kids, and they bring with it adult questions and adult concerns that actual kids don't give a shit about. They just take it at face value. I think it was always a bad idea anyway, even though I did enjoy the final product. But I am astonished at how Disney spent the last 2 years like tripping over themselves trying to explain what it was. And kids didn't care.
Yeah.
If they were going to go, because it was an outer space adventure starring Buzz Lightyear. Neat. But it was adults that were like, I don't understand this. This is confusing. What does this mean? Kids don't care. Mm-hmm. Kids didn't think the Polar Express looked scary. They thought it was cool. That was adults who were saying, ooh, the scary eyes, I'm scared. Kids didn't care. It wasn't for you. And, if I may be blunt, there's going to be a lot of chatter in the next 4 months about how Black Panther Wakanda Forever is or isn't dealing with the Chadwick Boseman factor. And I guarantee you most kids will take it at face value. It's the adults that are going to pretend that there's a right or wrong way to do it. And is this respectful? Is this not respectful? And, should they have recast? Should they not have recast? And it's a complicated conversation.
Yeah.
Speaking
of Daredevil,
after the baggage,
so they're going to go back to Daredevil again. They have 18 new 18-episode season coming out. Born Again, and they're bringing back Charlie. So he's getting a lot of work, Charlie Cox, and Vincent D'Onofrio. That's set to drop on Netflix.
Are not going to.
I guess the question is, when are people going to, or are people going to get tired of what they call superhero fatigue, whether it's in streaming or right.
Well, I don't think the shows are helping. And again, I think to a certain extent, the shows exist because Disney Plus needs content, obviously. I think they're going to exist ever more because they realized over the last 2 years that nobody watches anything on Disney Plus except for the Star Wars and the Marvel shows. Other than that, it's mostly a babysitting service. And that would be fine if it wasn't being held up as the new center of their universe. I mean, Peacock may not get the best ratings in the world, but I think to their credit, Comcast made a point not to position Peacock as the center of the Comcast empire. It's just another thing that can make them money. And I think by staying under the radar, I think they'll be fine in the long run. Paramount's a little more complicated. HBO Max is a little more complicated. I do think when you look at the movie schedule for Marvel, it's not like Phase 5 and Phase 5 has that many more movies than Phase 3 did. or that Phase 4 has that many more movies than Phase 3 did. And part of that is because, they weren't expecting to get Spider-Man. So that's 3 movies that were not necessarily in the initial plan. But I think the extent that it feels like there's all Marvel all the time is because of the TV shows. And if you are a general audience member, a consumer, you can choose what to watch or not watch. If you're a comic book fan, you don't walk into a comic book store and buy every single issue of every single book. You pick and choose what you want to read.
Yes.
And if you're a general consumer, I imagine that's how you approach the Marvel stuff, especially the TV shows. The problem is, if you're in the media, you kind of have to watch all this stuff as soon as it gets is available, and you have to have some kind of hot take and more nuanced opinion about it. So, in that sense, yeah, it's draining because it's always in your face all the time. And when people talk about superheroes and taking over Hollywood, they didn't take over Hollywood; they took over Hollywood marketing. They took over the media, so that even if there's only 4 or 5 superhero movies in a given year, you're reading about them or having to write about them, and comment on them, and have opinions about them all year round. And that is annoying, and it breeds resentment to a certain extent. But if you're just somebody that, just a general audience member that likes Marvel movies, and you show up to the Marvel movies because you like them, so you saw Doctor Strange in a theater, and then maybe you watched Loki because you like Loki, you might not watch Moon Knight, you might not watch Miss Marvel. I mean, Miss Marvel is a show aimed at children, and that's not a criticism, that is what it is. And I think there is an unfortunate, I was not happy about the, online discourse implying that people that weren't watching Miss Marvel, a show intended for children, weren't doing so because of, ethnic prejudice. Again, I love the Babysitter's Club. I don't expect adults to watch the Babysitter's Club. If you have kids that watch it, great. If you choose to watch it for yourself for whatever reason, awesome. But it's not intended for you. Now, the issue, the scary thing with Miss Marvel, which was pretty good, by the way, is that was a Marvel show that pulled ratings closer to just a regular kid show. And that's scary for them. Is this going to be a situation where Marvel shows that aren't either A, direct sequels to Avengers Endgame, which most of them have been so far, or relatively disconnected with a huge movie star like Oscar Isaac in the lead role, are those going to those shows?
I read your piece the other day. I read your piece about how
the musical series than or Obi-Wan
they
Kenobi.
Really.
And if that's the case, then there is trouble on the horizon.
No,
because Disney, and when I say Disney, I mean Bob Chapek, and basically Bob Chapek alone, all due respect, put all of the eggs in the Disney Plus basket, and is basically kneecapping their own theatrical division for, they're the only studio that hasn't fully recovered. And they're doing great with Marvel, but now Marvel's all they got. And not to and I've been tooting that horn for 2 or 3 years, just because, I'm not Nostradamus. It's just I pay attention in a way that I think a lot of people don't, either because they don't want to, because they don't want to lose access, or they don't want to be negative, or they don't interact with. Again, I don't want to be I probably should get off this thing of thought. But no, it's just I do my best to see how the real world is responding to this stuff. And the example I always give is that Star Trek Into Darkness, 2013, comes out, gets good reviews, an A cinema score, does good but maybe not superlative box office compared to Star Trek. The hardcore Star Trek fans, rightly or wrongly, hate it, and they basically vote on it as the worst Star Trek movie of all time. So now, even though the film got good reviews, an A from cinema score, decent box office, there is a perception that it is a terrible film and a bad Star Trek film. Whatever. But here's the thing. If you ask mom and pop moviegoer or, general moviegoers, they saw Star Trek Into Darkness on opening weekend.
Your regular moviegoer that
they thought
will
it was
just
fine.
go
Maybe they
watch
didn't
a
love it,
film and take a
but they thought
film
it was
in,
fine. It was a big,
and then have an opinion on it.
Sci-fi,
And then you
effects-driven
have
action
those
adventure
people
picture
that are
with charismatic movie
hardcore,
stars playing
those
marquee
people that are
characters
comic book
they knew and
fanatics,
liked.
and then those people
They
that
liked it.
so
Maybe
they
they saw
have
it
to
twice.
see
Maybe they saw it again and it was
X
on Blu-ray.
character translate to
Otherwise,
Y
they
on
went on with their
screen,
lives.
and then you have
And that's the way
that's a very
regular people
small
digest this stuff.
group
They don't
of the
spend 4
population,
years arguing about
and then
the
you
Last Jedi and the
have
Rise
the
of
people in the
Skywalker.
media that have to watch all of this and be able to funnel all of this in, take this in, be able to put it back out, and unfortunately, if you're writing your opinion, and whether you thought it was good, bad, or indifferent, and you're always going to get people out there that say, you know what, I didn't like this because you didn't like it, or for whatever reason, and it's like, come on, it's a movie, and people just take things too seriously. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a contingent of fans in every fandom, almost every fandom, that treat it like a borderline cult. That is a simplification and extreme, intentionally so. They treat it as a part of their personality. So when you say this latest Marvel movie is bad, or this latest, I didn't like Man of Steel. People act like you're insulting their children. And while these people are a minority, they are loud, and the SEO-driven media
Holy.
takes them to the top of the what gets talked about when you talk about these projects. And Disney made or Lucasfilm, I used to blame, made the terrible mistake of listening to these people at The Last Jedi and retrofitting The Rise of Skywalker to appease what turned out to be a very small and demographically irrelevant fan base, and they rightfully got dinged for it. And I think Marvel, to their credit, has been pretty good about ignoring that stuff. I mean, they didn't, when Age of Ultron only made $1.4 billion and only got solid reviews, and that's when you started seeing the whole super fatigue narrative, by the way, because the film that opened to $191 million in opening weekend and eventually earned $1.4 billion and made more overseas than the first Avengers picture. The general audiences thought it was good. But a year later, Captain America Civil War comes out. It's a more grounded picture. It's a more disciplined picture. It gives people what they want. But the general audiences thought it was just as good as Age of Ultron. Not any better, not any worse. It's like, oh, I like that one. I like this one too. There's no huge extreme in difference of opinion. And my own personal opinions on Star Wars notwithstanding, I imagine most people liked or really liked The Last Jedi. And then 2 years later, they walked into The Rise of Skywalker.
Speaking of...
I don't know.
I know. Speaking of fans, though, I just read a piece, I think it was in the Hollywood Reporter last week or the week after about the whole Justice League debacle.
Keep talking about this stuff because that's what
and
people want to do.
Yes.
And by people, I mean those who are
and so,
blind, click on those
it's just,
and share
you want to talk about
Twitter.
fans actually, pushing this and doing, saying things and whatever.
Because there was nothing
you wonder if that whole
we can't
conversation
move on to
had been started if we don't get the Snyder Cut.
Or, Black Widow never came out.
And it's like, I mean...
Oh, the Rolling Stone broke that story. It wouldn't have been. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a really complicated thing. First of all, I don't think 13% of it being bots versus usual 5 to 8% is in itself evidence of a grand conspiracy. I think it obviously didn't, it helped in terms of pushing that narrative, but I don't think it made a difference. Now, we have to remember in early 2020, there has been a large contingent of fans or bots or whatever they are that have been pushing they want a Snyder cut of Justice League. HBO Max is about to launch. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There's no new stuff being finished. Post-production houses are closing because there's nothing to work on. Jason Killer has basically put all of his eggs in the HBO Max basket.
It just...
Under those specific circumstances, it makes sense to throw a Hail Mary and give into that fan base, spend maybe a little more than they intended to, but whatever, spend my money, and get a year's worth of just free, non-stop media attention that constantly puts HBO Max in the conversation. And if by some fluke the fandom is real and lots of people watch it,
maybe bring Henry Cavill back.
Well, they got more off that than any number of prestige television shows that got canceled after 2 seasons that nobody watched. I mean, it's easy to say, ha, they all got fooled by bots.
Yeah.
But I don't I do not think that the bots were a deciding factor on them giving it the green light. I think it was a very specific set of circumstances that hopefully will never happen again. I mean, maybe if, God forbid, monkeypox turns into a thing, we'll get Jack's Justice League too. Because what else you got? Just give a joke about that. And then the other thing is that it had been so long since the first the Justice League movie that what media people claimed they wanted from their blockbuster entertainment had changed a little bit. So you had people that were in the front of the line with fire torches and pitchforks saying, Snyder has to go, Batman Superman is terrible, what the hell are they doing? Then 5 years later, like, Zack Snyder's Justice League is beautiful, this is what we need instead of Marvel. It's like, I read your earlier stuff 5 years ago. And so I think there's a certain cultural amnesia that brought that back to the front of the conversation, which really sucks for Warner Brothers, by the way. Regardless of which Justice League I like or whatever. I think the Snyder cut is better, but I think the Whedon cut or the producer's cut, let's be honest, wasn't like it was his personal vision or anything. I think that film is a fine 3-star picture in a world where superhero movies do not dominate the pop culture. I think in a normal world where it's just a movie, it's a 3-star Super Friends film. It's fine, whatever. But before COVID, Warner Bros. Was on a roll. They had Aquaman. They had Wonder Woman.
Getting back, I won't say golden age movies. What were some of the movies that that you went to see growing up that you said, I want to actually become a filmmaker or write about films?
And if Peacemaker really was as popular as they say it was, who knows? Then that might be, a worthwhile loss on their end. You spent $180 million on an R-rated Suicide Squad that bombed at the box office, and it was always going to bomb. All due respect, you don't have Will Smith, you don't have the Joker, you don't have Batman this time. But if Peacemaker puts HBO Max in the map, well, maybe it's worth it. Well, Tim Burton's Batman was sort of the one that turned me into a box office junkie. I was 9 years old, and I was and then, a couple of years later, I got a subscription to Entertainment Weekly. It was early 1991, so it was about a year after the publication. And you had the weekly top 10, and you had, articles about box office, and I started studying it. I would go down to I would try to find a USA Today on Monday morning that would have the top 5 or the top 10 box office listings. A little bit later in life, closer to mid to late 90s, headline news would have the top 3 movies, on late Sunday night. And then eventually, as the internet became a thing, Showbiz
that was a great year.
A site that had daily box office numbers. So I could find out what the movie on Friday. And that's when you first started to see the idea of weekend multipliers and stuff. Because it's great if this film did $60 million
that
in weekend, but it did 30 on Friday. That kind of sucks. And that's a problem. But as far
that's
as
actually one of the
Batman,
posters. So I don't know if you can see it, but that's actually one of the posters I have over there. Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, that was
Batman,
so.
Field of Dreams, Raiders.
I'm obsessed with that movie.
Empire.
It always amazes me, like the stories behind it, and so I'm sure you know this, or maybe you don't. But Gene Hackman actually bought the rights to Silence of the Lambs, Tom Sayre's book, and he bought it for $500,000. And we read it, and he said, "Well, I can't make this. This is too violent," because he was going to play Lecter. And he was going to direct it.
Yes, I know.
And so he bought it. He went back and sold it back to Orion. And so at that point, they had Jodie Foster already pegged for that movie because a couple of years earlier she just won for The Accused in 1988. And so, correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, by the way. And so Jonathan Demme, who had actually just come off doing Philadelphia with Tom Hanks. Oh, okay. Married the Mob. Thank you. And so thank you. So he then finds out about this somebody overseas named Anthony Hopkins. And so he goes over and he actually, he talks to him and says, so he presents him with the script. And Anthony Hopkins actually thought it was a children's book. And he turned it down a couple of times.
Yes.
And so finally, he said, okay. So once he found out who else was on board, he came on board. And then, so they actually never rehearsed. One of the first scenes they shot is when Starlin's walking down to talk to Lecter for the first time. And so, it's the famous scene where he says, "I'll help you catch him, Clarice." And so, at that point, he knew he had a hit on his hands. But I love that movie. I saw that at a drive-in with my mother. And that was the back half. That was the second movie. The first movie was Dances with Wolves. Yeah, it was a long night, but it was great. So... But yeah, and it always amazes me of all of the movies that have won. I mean, Silence of the Lambs is the last one to win the Big Five in '92, and it's always amazed me of all of the movies that have gotten 13, 14. I think La La Land got 16 nominations. Across American Hustle got 10. They were all nominated. Silver Linings Playbook gets nominated across the board. Not one movie in all of those years has ever won the Big Five since. And the last film to do it prior to that was the year I was born, 1975, with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Yeah, and I don't think it's going to happen for another 10 or 15 years. I mean, it's going to have to be a special, special movie. Do you think it's ever going to happen again, Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And before that, it happened one night, 1934. I can't imagine. Because, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, maybe. I mean, I don't know. But I think it's a rare picture in which, for one thing, I mean, Anthony Hopkins was committing category thrown.
I was just...
Respect. So you have a film with an unusually dynamic then and now
it's just
female protagonist.
I was actually just watching something today.
A respected director.
Amy Adams has got nominated for like 7 Academy Awards.
Blowout box office.
And that woman has never,
and then you have this wild card
won an Oscar. Whether it's from Arrival or American
But he runs
Hustle,
for Best Actor.
I'm just waiting.
Did it on Sherman Momentum. It does. I would acknowledge I'd still be pissed.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how pissed this note is?
But it's just, I love her as an actress. I love her. She's an amazing actress, and she's great in whatever she
lost to
does.
Romanian, basically.
Yeah. But I think, yeah. I mean, she's probably the best actress out there today, not to have an Oscar.
Like,
I mean, I hope at some point they don't just give her a sympathy Oscar. You know, okay, you've been nominated 7 times, here you go. You know, I hope she wins one because
she's the Susan Lucci of the Academy Awards.
Yeah.
Well, but if you
Susan.
The continuity of Arrival at face value,
Yeah.
she may still win an Oscar for Arrival at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
That she wasn't even nominated for.
So we
Arrival.
talked about some of the movies. Who were some of your favorite directors growing up?
It's her movie. It's a star vehicle.
Tim Burton from Batman. Yeah.
Yeah, give or take. Other than some people that are younger, that are, you know. Yeah. Susan Sarandon for Dead Man Walking is a rare case of someone who lost a bunch and then won for the right role.
Yeah.
For Dead Man Walking. Which would have deserved to win even if she had already won 6 times. And that's always nice when that happens. When it's not, you know, a makeup Oscar, a sympathy Oscar. Tim Burton, like a lot of people in my generation, he was basically film school in a box. Because, you know, if you're a kid, and you know, even if you're not reading movie magazines, like he had such a distinct style, and in terms of cinematography, in terms of production design, in terms of the Danny Elfman school, in terms of the people that he always liked to cast. It's like, you know, auteur theory for kids, basically. It's like, it's so obvious that it's a Tim Burton movie that even a layperson can say, "Oh, that's a Tim Burton movie," and this makes it a Tim Burton movie. Yeah. Ergo, I understand film theory a little bit better. So I grew up as a big Tim Burton fan. I still am. I mean, I will argue that he's remained a one for me.
Yeah,
one
I just
for
saw
them
that
film
Signs turned 20 this last year.
You know, for every Alice in Wonderland he gives us.
That's hard to believe.
It's just when nobody shows up to Big Eyes,
Yeah.
nobody shows up to Dumbo, which I don't hate.
Yeah.
Then he gets the reputation.
Yeah.
Of just sell out. It's like, you don't see his regular movies anymore. And also, I mean, he has, you know, his style, his signature, has gone from being unique unto himself to basically being the template for fantasy blockbuster filmmaking. To the point where, you know, one reason his stuff feels old as because Hollywood's been writing him off for 20 years, 30 years.
So let's go to something.
Yeah, but you know, M. Night Shyamalan.
Did you see Nope?
Adored, and I still do. But you know, those.
What did you think of it?
Run is still freaking awesome. Yeah. Yeah, that's a banger of a picture. I saw that twice in a crowded theater. It was a fun movie to watch in a crowded theater. Obviously, I like Nolan as much as the next nerd. As I said, I'm starting to become a Maria Heller fan. I loved her first 3 movies, and I expect her to, to keep going and going and going. It would be nice if Sarah Polley makes a movie again. I mean, she hasn't made anything since the documentary 10 years ago. Yeah, I'm a Jordan Peele fan. I didn't like it as much as his first 2 pictures. I think it's narratively unwieldy. I think it presumes facts, not evidence, in terms of character development and story. I don't need everything explained. In fact, one of the things I like about Us, for example, is that there are a lot of fantastical elements that are just taken at face value. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I also
I
think
did as well.
And I don't know how you get around this from a marketing perspective because you have to sell the movie. But I felt that the marketing was very spoilery in terms of major images that were toward the end of the movie, or callback images that are sort of tossed off as just something random that happened in the first act. And also, it's a film like Bradbury's Tomorrowland, like this film was Interstellar, that was sort of sold as a mystery box, but really it's what you see is what you get.
I stopped after.
And again, that's not
I stopped after Fast Five. I was just okay.
But I think as a movie, I'm probably seeing it again this week because my wife hasn't seen it yet, and she wants to. I'll probably see it again this weekend, either in IMAX or if there's a Dolby. I saw it in IMAX for the premiere, and it looked fantastic. But yeah, he's certainly up there in terms of modern. I love James Wan.
Yeah.
I'm a huge James Wan fan. He's in his own weird, skewed way. He's become a modern Spielberg. And I think he's probably one of the best pure blockbuster filmmakers around. And I loved Aquaman. I think Furious 7 is by far the second best Fast and Furious movie behind Fast 5. And after that, it's just like a nosedive to whatever. I think Too Fast and Furious made number 3 on my list. And Malignant was bundles of fun.
Yeah.
I love Malignant. I'm very much looking forward to Aquaman too. And that is an example of a big budget superhero movie that really feels like a distinct personal vision. In that it feels like a James Wan picture.
Yeah, I mean,
and I'm not saying none of the Marvel films have that. That's one of the reasons I like Shang-Chi as much as I do, because it felt like a director by the guy that made Search and 12 in the Glass House.
Well, no, I think isn't he going to Toronto Film Festival?
The themes that he's dealt with.
So I mean, this is going to be one of the first campaigns
went very well
that he's
with
doing
in
quite a few years.
So it sort of meshed, which is why you hire him for a movie like that, because he can make a movie that is unique, that feels of a pace with his other films while still playing in the Marvel sandbox.
And that's the other thing too. How do you? What would you consider
I'm not
garbage? I mean, it's like anything.
Spielberg in 1941. And of course, Spielberg's still around, telling everyone to get off his lawn in glorious fucking fashion. I mean, I keep thinking he's just going to retire, but then he announces another movie, and then it turned out to be fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
every Steven Spielberg drama since after Amistad has been nominated for Best Picture. So all of his serious films have been, so I would guarantee this gets a Best Picture nomination, unless it's garbage. And I'm assuming it's not. Well, with Spielberg, there are Spielberg films that I don't like, but I think probably 90% of his filmography would be like the best movie you've ever made from 99%.
I still remember. No, absolutely.
War of the Worlds is
and by the way, if you want to go back and listen to the Steven Spielberg podcast I did, we talk all about his films and we count down our personal top 10.
I mean, he's just
but it's one of those things where
even Ready Player One,
it's one of those things where I love Lincoln,
but he managed to
I don't care what most people
make
say.
A film that felt
I
like
love Lincoln. Lincoln.
I'm going to teach you guys how to do this stuff again.
When Daniel Day-Lewis's third Oscar, Sally Field was amazing. The whole meditation and that's one of those films that is just
Spielberg and maybe Lucas.
It's not a war film per se, like a Saving Private Ryan, but it's about a man who has to deal with that.
What kind of world have they made?
Yeah, I mean, so I
grew up. I found it very profound in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Eunuch.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just he's as far as I'm concerned, he's on the Mount Everest of filmmakers for me. I mean, Spielberg, Scorsese,
it feels
can
like,
throw any other two
what
up
if
there
the
you
West
want.
Wing
But those
during
two,
the Civil War,
I mean,
which is a
Lucas.
good pitch. And what I
The
like
thing about
about it is
Lucas
that,
is,
at its core,
Star Wars.
It's about
But he,
moral compromise. To achieve
and that's the thing.
his
Like
moral
he
goals.
says, and he's come out and said he hates directing. He hated directing Phantom Menace. So he would rather have somebody else do it. But
the very first scene has.
I mean, so you could pick any other two there you wanted. But yeah, it's one of those things where
Lincoln gives him a
we are blessed as far as filmmakers,
and at least
or
one of
as
those
film
soldiers
fans and in the media that you can.
And I think it's much more.
No, I was just going to say we are blessed, for film fans and in the media that basically, So, but this is. It's just another cycle. Yeah.
I wish he'd work more. I mean, obviously that broke him.
Yeah. I think the one for me is David O. Russell.
Yeah.
I just, I think he is just Silver Linings Playbook, American Hustle, Joy. I mean,
I'm sorry, I'm sure you can skip out. What was the
can,
last?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, well, but the thing is that he's able to, and that's why his films are so good, is the simple fact that he worked with the same people.
Every film he makks.
And they know, once you work with them, they know what, all you got to do is take The Fighter and take, one of the other movies, and you get Silver Linings Playbook. And it's like, okay. Or Silver Linings Playbook and The Fighter, and you get American Hustle. And so once they knew, once they understand what they want, but it's just Hollywood is one. So one final question for you: what do you think is the biggest change in the last 20 years in Cuban, or a couple of the biggest changes that you have noticed personally since you started covering Hollywood?
And he may be a schmuck in real life, but I wouldn't, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think for me, the biggest change, and this sort of explains everything else that's annoying us, there is a smaller portion of people that go to the movies just to go, this is even before COVID, that go to the movies just to go to the movies. And that's the audience that used to count on to see just a studio programmer, as well as the big blockbuster films. So once you lost that audience to streaming and TV and social media or whatever, you had an ecosystem where people didn't go to the movies unless there's something they specifically want to see at a theater soon, because they're slowly realizing that they can see it on VOD or streaming in a month and a half. That's not good, but whatever. Excuse me, Broken. So as a result, you have, starting in 2017, 2018, whatever, you had Hollywood kind of starting to make the kind of movies that we all said we wanted in terms of star projects, inclusivity, diversity, adult skewing, whatever, and nobody showed up. I think what we've seen, and this goes in terms of ticket sales, in terms of overall box office, this is before COVID, obviously, but overall box office, up. Some of that's true to rising ticket prices. Some of that's due to more people spending money at premium auditoriums like IMAX or Dolby. More people that are going to movies are going to some premium theaters like dining theaters, which is great for the theaters because they make their money off food anyway. Ticket sales are down continuously, but they're not catastrophically down. I mean, and I was surprised when I did this research in early 2019 when I was comparing 2018, where ticket sales were down, but they were basically about like, there's like 100 million, and that seems like a lot, but when you're dealing with billions, there's like like a million, like 1.2 to 1. Yeah, it's 100 million, right? Yeah. Like 100 million tickets less sold between like 2018 and 1993. So over like a 20-year period, 25-year period, give or take, whatever, yeah, 20, that, it's there hasn't been that much of a change, even with DVD, video on demand, YouTube, streaming, all these distractions that didn't exist, even 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But the big difference, and this, in my opinion, explains everything else, the much larger majority of the annual domestic box office is being spent on a smaller portion of annual releases. So the big movies are sucking up more of the overall annual expense than they were even 6 or 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So box office up, ticket sales declining, but not catastrophic.
So you don't think Tom Cruise is a movie star?
The surefire tentpoles, the top 6, top 8, top 10 movies of the year, are taking up anywhere from 25% to 1/3 of the overall ticket sales for a given year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that leaves everything else fighting for a much smaller portion of the pie. And that, in my mind, is why you have this phenomenon where films that would have been solid programmers 10 years ago can now barely justify a theatrical release. I mean, 10 years, 10 years ago, Sandra Bullock's The Lost City making $100 million would have been, well, that's not bad.
Lower.
She's done better, but that's not bad. But now it's a freaking miracle. But again, Sandra Bullock is a movie star. In my opinion, she is right up there with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's her and Leo, and that's it, at the top of the food chain. On streaming, too, because 2 of the biggest Netflix movies ever, not unless he's playing a marquee character like Ethan Hunt or apparently Maverick Mitchell. And the extent that I underestimated Top Gun is
I don't think anybody
did not know for sure that character was as much of a marquee character as Ethan Hunt.
Yeah.
Because going back 10, 15 years, there's a ceiling for its non-Mission Impossible movies, at least since War of the Worlds, which was what he was promoting in the whole Katie Holmes, the NBC anchor, whose name was anyway, when the Scientology was in the forefront.
Unbelievable.
I don't want to say the couch jump because he didn't actually jump the couch. But since that time, there has been a ceiling for non-Mission Impossible films, and it's been mostly under $400 million. So going into summer, 2022. Yeah, I did not think that a Top Gun sequel 38 years later was going to make $1.3 billion worldwide.
Yeah.
Mea culpa. But that doesn't mean that the next Edge of Tomorrow is going to make $500 million.
Well, I think if he's with The Rock, I think then,
Tom Cruise plays a guy doing a thing in a movie that isn't,
anything that he's done with Dwayne Johnson
is going to do $400 million.
He seems to have done well. So, I mean, but maybe it's just, Dwayne Johnson box office names. So, I mean, they're going there to see him. They're not going to see...
So, no, in my opinion, Sandra Bullock, Leonardo DiCaprio, and everyone else is in, to varying degrees. Denzel Washington, if the budget is right, as a righteous Revenger man, he is a draw. Gerard Butler, if it's a $15 million opening, as a B-movie action star, he is a draw. There was a period, I don't think it's anymore, where Meryl Streep was a $20 million opener for a while.
Yeah.
But that was in the good times. Kevin Hart was an opener before COVID. I don't know if he still is, because he refuses to put any of his movies in theaters. And again, I understand that sensibility. Yeah. Yeah. Dwayne Johnson is a star.
And you gotta wonder though, why
he's a very
you get such a big. Why
By
would
that I
if you're
mean in the right
whether you're a
package,
publicist or a
he is
manager,
but
why
he's
would
not
you
bulletproof.
ever,
In the same way,
ever
Kevin Costner
have your client ever do something like that? It's like, okay, fine, maybe we're waiting 6 months for this other movie to finish up. You know, the script rewrites and whatever. But come on.
But yeah, Dwayne Johnson, when he's in an IP.
But when you make enough movies,
he tends to pick IPs where he's bigger than the IP. You know, he's bigger than Rampage.
Yeah.
He's bigger than Jumanji. He's bigger than Black Adam, I would say.
Yeah, but when you make enough movies.
But if there's no IP, or if it's a bad IP like Baywatch, which no one wanted it. No one actually wanted a Baywatch movie.
Yeah.
No one actually watched that sincerely.
Yeah. It's just.
And those that did watch it sincerely didn't want to see a comedy.
All right. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure and a blast, and I could talk to you for hours. So I just want to thank you for coming on again. And you're welcome here anytime you'd like. So for all of those that are listening, let me just plug a couple of shameless things here. Coming up next week, we actually have Mob Mondays starting, which we will. I'll be talking all about mob movies to start.
Specific package,
we're going to be kicking it off with the 2006 Best Picture winner, The Departed.
It also
and
spent
Goodfellas. Unfortunately, we just lost
which means it had
legend the other day in Paul Sorvino. Passed away at 83. So we're going to be doing Goodfellas. The week after that, we're going to be doing Black Mass. And I believe the week after that is Scarface, the 1983 De Palma movie. So this Friday, we have Flashback Fridays. And this is going to be Doctor Strange.
The pleasure is at least half.
I believe we are in phase 3 right now, and that was in 2016. So
you're very welcome.
Stay tuned for that. And then at the end of the month, we're going to be starting. Lisa and I are going to be starting this new Game of Thrones series, House of Dragons. We're going to be doing spoiler cast for each and every episode. That's going to run 10 weeks all the way through the end of October. And then we are going to be doing Rewatch Wednesdays, where I sit down and watch a movie I haven't seen, which she has, and then we're going to do it vice versa. So that's going to be a blast. And then, so both of those are going to be paywalls. Those are going to be $6.99 each for Mob Mondays and Rewatch Wednesdays when that comes along. Don't forget, you still have the Main Topic podcast, just like this one, completely free of charge. You're going to have the Roundup coming up this weekend. And, don't forget, our Patreon is live right now, guys. Go to patreon.com. We have 4 affordable levels, $3, $7, $15, and only $20 a month. Or if you want, you can shoot me a tweet on Twitter at wannaberounder. I will then put your name on the list for a shout-out. If you are listening on an Apple Podcast, please rate us. Tell us what you think. I'd like to hear your feedback. And you can also follow me on Instagram at dcaduto. And that's about it. So before we go, Scott, just tell the listeners one more time where they can hit you up or follow your work. But please, just if you are listening, tell your friends about us. these are the kind of interviews we like to bring you on a regular basis. Actually, on Friday, I'm going to be interviewing. This is going to be a personal interview. Chad Holloway is a 2013 World Series of Poker bracelet winner, so he's going to be on the show. I actually have that's one of my favorite movies up there was Rounders. So, all right, but until next time, once again, thank you very much for coming on. I've had an absolute blast. So for David Steele
yes,
and Mr. Scott
I'm at
Mendelson,
Forbes.com.
this has been
It's
Real Talk.
Booth, and it's an official name of my quote-unquote blog. But just Google Scott Mendelson, the ticket booth. I'm on Twitter at Scott Mendelson. And I have a Facebook page. It's mostly for kid photos and cat photos. Yeah, in terms of being obnoxious online, I'm mostly at Twitter. You're very welcome.